Which African countries are still paying the so-called colonial tax to France? We know Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger had completely cut off from France or from Western influence. They've cut that lifeline of free money to France. They completely shut that door against France. But still yet, some African countries are still paying that money to France. Most African countries are still confused. Many African countries don't even know if they're going forward or if they are going backward. They are just stand still. They don't know what is going on. This video is going to be information packed, and I'm going to give you the list of the countries that are still paying the so-called colonial tax to France. Now, colonialism officially ended a decade ago, but it is still, the effect of colonialism is still very much fresh up to today. Some African countries in form of colonial tax are still paying money to France. For what? That is the question I'm asking. For what? You were colonized by France. They destroyed your ways of life. They maltreated you. They enslaved you. And now you have to pay money back to them. I mean, what is going on? What is going on? These payments were created during the colonial times, and they continued with the agreement during the independence of this country. The system allows France to take about 85% of the annual income of these former colonies of France. As a result of this, these African countries I'm going to mention now are struggling financially, and they have to borrow their own money back from France Central Bank in form of loan. They can't even borrow up to 20% of their money, otherwise the application will be rejected. I made a video about that. Go in my video library and look for that video. Now, when any African country refuses to pay this colonial tax, you know what happened? You know what France does to them? When they refuse to pay this tax, you know what France does? It leads to three things. Either coup will happen in that country, or they will set up a severe disruption in that country, or they will start their media blackmail of that African country. So, ladies and gentlemen, in no particular order, which African countries are still paying France the so-called colonial tax? Number one, Benin Republic. Benin is a former Dahomey that gained independence in 1960, but they still pay money to France. And critics from the country had argued that this money they are paying to France had prevented Benin from using his own money to develop his own country, like building schools, building hospitals, and creating jobs. But then they donate 85% of their money to France in form of colonial tax. Number two, Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast is used to be one of the strongest African economy. They play a major role in the CFA payment system. They still pay colonial tax to France, which again, critics continue to complain that this colonial tax they're paying to France is crippling the country, and it had hindered development in Côte d'Ivoire. But yet, they have the puppet. Their masters installed puppet as the leader of the country, and the puppet has to answer to his master. They still pay the so-called colonial tax up till tomorrow. Guinea broke away from France's financial agreement in 1958. They demanded full independence, and in response to this, France punished Guinea. They removed Guinea from their resources and also destroyed a lot of infrastructure they built in Guinea. Although Guinea stood firm. They didn't back down. They still stood their ground, but they struggled to fully escape France colonial system influence in their country. Again, the installation of puppet government. The government is still bowing down to France. They bend over for France to stick everything in their behind. They are still paying colonial tax to France. Senegal. Senegal is known for its political stability. Well, as far as we know previously, they still pay colonial tax to France because of the use of the CFA France system. Now, let me tell you something. You see, all those African countries that uses CFA, they all pay colonial tax to France because CFA France is not an African money. It was the French payment system that was, generated in Africa. So as long as your country uses CFA France, your government is paying colonial tax to France. Because I guess some people will argue, oh no, Guinea was not a former colony of France. Senegal was not a former colony of France. Okay, you're right. You're correct. But as long as they use the CFA payment system, they are paying colonial tax to France. Look it up. Educate yourself, okay? This is a learning platform and we're learning together. So if you didn't know, now you know. Senegal had not fully achieved financial independence from France because they used the CFA franc, right? Togo is another country, a very small but fully enriched, natural resources wise, Togo is enriched, but they also use the CFA payment system. If you use the CFA France payment system, your country pays colonial tax to France. If you didn't know, now you know. It's not about if your country was a former colony of France or not. As far as your country uses the CFA payment system, your country is paying colonial tax to France every single year. Cameroon. Cameroon, that country. Cameroon has a dual colonial history under France and under the British rule. The country continues, obviously, to pay colonial tax to France, and as part of its CFA France system, the financial obligation in Cameroon, don't even talk about it. Cameroon is completely gone. I don't even know how the election in Cameroon went. Please, guys, if you know what the result of the election in Cameroon was, please leave it in the comment section. Let me know. So Cameroon is also paying colonial tax to France because of their use of the CFA France system. Chad. Chad is another oil-rich African country, yet it is one of the poorest countries in the world, but they have a lot of oil. Are they drinking the oil? Are they drinking the crude oil? Are they drinking the gas they get from their country? Of course not. Of course not. The Western powers, the Western masters, what's the word I'm looking for here? They are exploiting them. How can your country be one of the, in Africa, as small as Chad is, they are enriched and blessed with oil and gas and natural resources, yet they are one of the poorest countries in the world. Not in Africa, in the world. Where are the natural resources going? Ask yourself. Ask yourself. Their wealth flows directly to France. You don't have to agree. Listen, everything I'm telling you right now, Google it, check it, read, do some reading, ask questions. Chad finance system and money and natural resources flow directly through the French bank. And they are struggling financially, they are struggling economically, no infrastructure in Chad. But yet, they are blessed with oil and natural resources. Again, they use the CFA France payment system, and they continued to pay colonial tax to France. The three countries, so far so good, that God had blessed with leaders that have Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Look how life is flourishing in those countries at the moment, for now, because these guys would not back off. Burkina Faso and Niger were the countries France was getting the most natural resources from. And those countries have now literally squeezing the life out of France's financial system. And do you think France is going to just back out and just let it go easy? We hear the news, we hear all the conspiracy theories they are doing. They are trying every day to try to get Ibrahim Traore and some of the leaders in those countries. They will continue to try, because how can you squeeze 500 billion US dollars out of France's pocket just like that? And you think they will back off? Africa, make una wake up. So, ladies and gentlemen, if your country is among those countries I've just mentioned that is still paying colonial tax to France, what's up? What is going on? According to the Jamaican, Wagwan, yes. So, why are you paying colonial tax? You were colonized decade or century or whatever ago, and yet that effect is still going on to it's still affecting you. Why should it affect you when your forefathers, when your great grandfathers, when your four grandfathers or whatever you want to call it are suffered, they paid the price? Why should you also carry that burden now? Why is your government still paying colonial tax to some country? Have you actually asked yourself? Check it and let me know what you think.